The Silence of Buddha. Welcome back everyone to Mind Podcast. The name of Buddha Shakyamuni means the silent sage of the Shakya clan, or the silent sage of the Shakyas. The Sanskrit word muni means silent. Buddha also has the name Mahamuni. Maha means great, and Mahamuni means the great silent one, or the great sage of silence. Indeed, Buddha is a silent sage whose teachings aim to guide sentient beings to realms of peace and tranquility, calmness and serenity. All words age and disappear, they are born and die. Only silence is eternal and vibrant. The silence of Buddha from more than 2,500 years ago still remains within us today if we know how to see it and hear its echo within us. This silence is evidenced by Buddha's way of living, manifesting in every action of Buddha and pervading Buddha's teachings. This silence is as vast as space and as infinite as time. Let us try to understand a portion of the great meaning of that silence through Buddha's Dharma, for perhaps that boundless silence itself is liberation. Silence before questions. Some questions were posed to Buddha, but he did not answer because they were misguided and pointless questions. Clinging to such questions with mere logical arguments will lead to the traps of conventional, formulaic, and dualistic understanding. These traps lead to endless debates and continuous confusion, diverting one from the path of practice. Many teachers who lived during Buddha's time, that is the 6th century BCE, advocated various metaphysical philosophies, but Buddha shielded his disciples from these traps, not by prohibition, argument, or explanation, but by silence. There are a total of 14 such questions that Buddha did not answer. 1. Is the universe eternal? 2. Is the universe not eternal? 3. Is the universe both eternal and not eternal? 4. Is the universe neither eternal nor not eternal? 5. Is the universe finite? 6. Is the universe infinite? 7. Is the universe both finite and infinite? 8. Is the universe neither finite nor infinite? 9. Are the soul and the body identical? 10. Are the soul and the body different? 11. Does a liberated being exist after death? 12. Does a liberated being not exist after death? 13. Does a liberated being both exist and not exist after death? 14. Does a liberated being neither exist nor not exist after death? These questions are recorded in the Kula Malunkyaputta Sutta, which presents the unanswered questions posed by a disciple named Malunkyaputta to Buddha. Buddha did not answer these questions directly, but redirected Malunkyapputta's concerns to more practical matters. The sufferings that are present and the turmoil disturbing Malunkyapputta's mind. O Malunkyaputta, whether the universe is finite or infinite, what should be understood first is that there is birth, there is aging, there is death, there is sorrow, there is lamentation, there is pain, there is grief, and there is despair. As for me, I only teach you the cessation of these in this world, in this very life. Therefore, O Malunkyaputta, hold in mind what I have taught, as I have taught, and what I have not taught, as I have not taught. Excerpt from Kula Malunkyaputta Sutta, translated by Mohan Wijayaratna. Scriptures recount a story. A man was struck by a poisoned arrow, but instead of removing the arrow and bandaging the wound, he questioned who shot the arrow, what the bowstring was made of, and how the poison was concocted. If he continued questioning, he would die before receiving answers to his inquiries. Buddha is not a religious leader imposing dogmas, nor a philosopher or scientist providing explanations about the universe or metaphysical arguments. Buddha is a spiritual teacher, guiding us to see the nature of our existence, and also a healer, helping us overcome suffering to find true and lasting peace. The Kula Malunkyaputta Sutta emphasizes the futility of metaphysical and purely logical debates. Knowledge of these things does not aid progress on the path because it is of no use for peace and enlightenment. What is beneficial for peace and enlightenment, which Buddha taught to his disciples, are these truths: the reality of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering. Excerpt from Kula Malunkyaputta Sutta, translated by Etienne Lamotte. Instead of engaging in endless dualistic and conventional debates, Buddha brought Malunkyaputta back to reality to directly perceive the true nature of existence. Buddha gave his disciple Malunkyaputta, and also us today, a miraculous medicine, but did not mention the dimensions of the universe. When the medicine of Dharma has permeated our consciousness, dissolving the toxins of ignorance, The essence of the universe will appear clearly to us without needing to ask Buddha whether the universe is eternal. Silence is an open door, an infinite space. Rational questioning is a closed action, a form of dualism and bondage. By contemplating deeply, we will see the profound subtlety in the presentation and teachings of Buddha in the scriptures. For instance, the presentation of questions in the Kula Malunkyaputta Sutta. Each inquiry is raised sequentially with 4 questions. Is the universe eternal? Is the universe not eternal? Is the universe both eternal and not eternal? Is the universe neither eternal nor not eternal? If only one question is asked, is the universe eternal or not? The question will be incomplete, and its one-sidedness will lead to endless debate. The second part of the question, is the universe not eternal? The 2 presentations of the question reflect the opposing nature of dualism, yes and no. The third and fourth parts of the question, the universe is both eternal and not eternal, neither eternal nor not eternal, dissolve the entirety of the question, rendering the inquiry meaningless. In conclusion, a complete question already contains its answer. Buddha's silence is profoundly significant. Let's examine the above issue from another perspective. When Malunkyaputta asked Buddha whether the universe is eternal, he inadvertently fell into several errors. He viewed the universe as a clear-cut totality, while in reality, the universe is merely a composite of various elements. He perceived the universe as existing firmly, but the universe is merely a product of impermanence. He considered the universe as an entity outside of the mind, but in truth, the universe is merely a projection of the mind. These crude errors show that Malunkyapputta's question was fundamentally flawed. However, as previously mentioned, the third and fourth parts of the question concerning whether the universe is both eternal and not eternal indirectly dissolve the dualities of existence and non-existence, addressing the misuse of dualistic language. Malunkyapputta's question may appear logical, but it is actually meaningless. Meaningless because it relies on conventional, formulaic, and oppositional expression. Furthermore, to clarify for scientists and philosophers, Buddhists seek the absolute truth, a real truth of reality, free from the nature of illusion, impermanence, and change. This truth is called the absolute reality. They do not seek relative truths determined by observation, description, measurement, mathematical arguments, or scientific hypotheses, nor do they rely on purely rational arguments of philosophers. In summary, Buddha's silence is a method of cutting off purely rational thinking, breaking the conventional and formulaic nature of language, including the relative understanding of science and the purely rational understanding of philosophers. Understanding in Buddhism is a direct experiential knowledge discovered through practice and spiritual transformation, a supernatural, clear, and absolute understanding. This understanding is called wisdom, the silence of sensory perception. There is a highly important concept in Buddhism that relatively few people pay close attention to, the concept of the 6 senses, ayatana. Buddhism considers the brain as a sense organ like the others. For example, the ear hears sounds and the brain perceives thoughts and emotions. So what are the 6 senses? Eye sense, vision, eyes; ear sense, hearing, ears; nose sense, smell, nose; tongue sense, taste, tongue; body sense, touch, body; mind sense, thought and emotion; perception, brain. This classification and definition are unique to Buddhism. The concept of the 6 senses is central and simultaneously the object of practice because they are the source of all errors and disturbances. The usual classification includes the 6 senses, but detailed scriptures distinguish them into 12 types. Dvadasa ayatana. One side is the 6 sense organs, and the other side is the 6 types of objects perceived, collectively called the 12 worlds or realms of sensory knowledge. The 6 sense organs are called the 6 internal sources of knowledge, grahaka, including the source from the eye, caksarayatana, the source from the ear, srotrayatana, from the nose, granayatana, from the tongue, jivayatana, from the body, from the mind, mana ayatana. The 6 external objects, graya, of perception are forms, rupayatana; sounds, sabdayatana; smells, gandhayatana; tastes, rasayatana; textures, hard, soft, hot, cold, sprastavyatana; mental objects, dharmayatana; They are called sources because they generate the dualistic distinction of subject-object, grahya-grahaka, and act as intermediaries between the internal subject and the external object. However, from another perspective, the scriptures classify the 6 internal sources and the 6 external sources into 3 groups. The first group includes 5 internal sources: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. The second group includes 5 external sources: forms, visible by the eye, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects, recognizable by touch. The third group is the source of internal consciousness and the source of its objects, mental phenomena. The operation of the brain and mental objects has quite special and complex characteristics, so the scriptures classify them into a separate group, as in the classification above. Mental objects are often misunderstood as the self, the ego, the I, Atman. The brain's activities are nourished by the sources of the first and second groups: eye, ear, nose, tongue, forms, sounds, smells, tastes. This lengthy explanation may seem off topic, but it is not, because the 12 sources of perception are the 12 sources of pollution, meaning the noises, the disturbances that disrupt the mind, losing its silence. Understanding the operation of the 6 senses will make it easier to grasp the meaning of silence in Buddha's Dharma. Let's take the example of the ear sense and sound. Sound is the object of the ear. The ear perceives sound. The signal from the ear triggered by sound is transmitted to the brain. The brain perceives these signals and recognizes or understands it as sound. Sound consists of waves of various frequencies from low to high, and the ear can only perceive a certain range of these frequencies. A hard-of-hearing person cannot hear very faint sounds, and a deaf person cannot perceive sound at all. A congenitally deaf person has no experience of sound. A person who is distracted, even if sound stimulates the ear and the ear transmits the signal to the brain, the mind sense does not perceive it because the distraction covers it up. When the brain perceives the signal from the ear and understands it as sound, this understanding is the most initial interpretation arising from the mind sense or perception. The interpretation by the brain or perception, or more generally the mind, does not stop there. Why? Because some sounds are pure noises. Some are curses, laughter, cries, songs, music, praise, criticism, soothing words, stabbing, gunfire, explosions. The recognition and meaning of these sounds are interpreted by the mind sense. The interpretation does not stop at these forms of understanding, because emotions automatically arise in relation to the interpretation of signals, such as joy, sorrow, interest, anger, desire, hope, anxiety, fear, horror, etc. These emotions further cause disturbances in the mind, which then translate into physical reactions and result in behavior. The silence of the mind, or the 6th sense, is a state that eliminates all levels of interpretation mentioned above. A mind that perceives the external world through the 6 senses but does not interpret anything is a peaceful, calm, and completely tranquil mind. Emotions caused by the 6 senses interpretation lead to attachment or aversion, which then lead to intentions, and from intentions arise deliberate actions. The Sutra of 42 chapters records the words of Buddha Kassapa, a past Buddha, as taught by Buddha Shakyamuni. Desire arises from intention, attachment, or aversion. Intention arises from thoughts, interpretation. If both intention and thoughts become calm, silent, there will be no color desire and no deliberate actions. The above verses summarize the process of the pulling force of interpretation arising from the 6th sense, which is the mind or consciousness. The silence of meditation. One of the goals of meditation is to reveal a calm and peaceful mind, samatha. How does this peaceful and calm state of mind relate to the operation of the 6 senses? Practicing meditation or Zen is a method that helps the mind to settle, or in other words, to stop thinking. Understand that not thinking in this context means not letting the mind be controlled by a continuous chain of thoughts and emotions. Thus, the state of settled mind and not thinking is essentially silence. The silence of the mind in Zen Buddhism is an original or pure state before being disturbed by intentions, desires, thoughts, and concepts, meaning all forms of interpretation. A mind that is not disturbed by any form of interpretation is a truly balanced, silent, and clear state. This state represents the cessation of the following process: perception, interpretation, thought, emotion, intention, language, and deliberate actions. The silence of an undisturbed mind can be achieved through the sitting meditation posture and various other practices depending on the school. Sitting still, with only the movement of the breath remaining, helps the mind to settle. Let's take a practical example. You're sitting still in meditation, observing the operation of the mind, trying to follow and calm all thoughts and emotions. But suddenly, someone outside the door or in the next room starts whispering, speaking ill, or making unkind remarks about you. You focus on listening, your face may flush with anger, and you might stand up to confront or argue. Or while sitting in meditation, you hear two neighbors arguing in front of your house. Their argument escalating, using vulgar language, seemingly about to fight. Although this has nothing to do with you, you might stand up to go see. All these reactions, these deliberate actions, are due to interpretation. Sound waves from the external source stimulate the internal source, which is the ear sense, sending signals to the brain. The brain receives these signals, compares them with memory, knowledge and dualistic experience, formulaic and conventional understanding accumulated earlier, and interprets them as speech or arguments. The interpretation is pushed further. The speech is an insult to you. The argument suggests an impending conflict. These interpretations lead to emotions: anger because of the insult, curiosity about the upcoming fight. These emotions, like anger and curiosity, transform into deliberate actions, making you abandon the meditation posture and stand up. Why is it important to identify such actions as deliberate? Because all deliberate actions create karma, and karma means action. There are non-deliberate actions such as digestion, burping, coughing, blinking, stretching limbs. These actions are called neutral. Although neutral, they still create karma, but the karma generated is very small, almost negligible. Every movement creates consequences except for complete silence, an absolute non-violent state of both body and mind, which does not generate karma. So how can a person meditating avoid being disturbed by external circumstances and stand up? They must stop the process of interpretation arising from the sixth sense. We cannot stop sound waves, prevent the ear from receiving these waves, or stop the brain from receiving the signals. This example can be applied to other senses like sight, smell, etc. In short, the operation of the six senses in relation to the external environment remains in its normal operating condition, but interpretation does not occur. The meditator remains fully aware of the contact of the mind with the external world, but emotions and intentions do not manifest. When one is aware of and controls the six senses, a meditator can keep the mind balanced and calm in any situation, even during normal activities, meaning not needing to sit still. This person can be working, walking in a market, on the street, amidst the noise and chaos of the external environment, but the mind remains silent, serene, as if working or walking in a peaceful, tranquil, and radiant realm. It is important to clarify that this state is not one of unconsciousness or sensory paralysis, but rather a state of expanded and heightened awareness of the six senses, a state of true mindfulness, different from distraction or insensitivity, such as being deaf, blind, or comatose. Coma, or damaged senses that do not register signals, is a silent state of death, not the silence of an awakened mind. Koans and the silence of Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is a practice centered around silence, thoroughly implementing silence, and minimizing conventional and dualistic language. Aside from the basic Mahayana Buddhist scriptures used in Zen, the scriptures, roku, specific to this school mainly consist of anecdotes, short dialogues, mondo, and especially koans koan. The term koan originates from the Chinese gongden, Korean kongden, and Japanese koan, but the word does not appear in classical scriptures in Sanskrit or Pali. Koans are a novel application of the Buddhist teachings that emerged during the widespread development of Zen in China, particularly from the 6th century and especially from the 10th century to the present day. Koans consist of thousands of stories or short statements and quotations from scriptures, compiled into collections such as the Blue Cliff Record, the Gateless Gate, the Book of Serenity, and the Record of Linji. Zen texts list a total of 1,700 koans, with about a third still regularly used in practice today. Modern Zen masters continue to create new koans. Each Zen student, upon taking refuge, is often given a koan by their teacher. So what exactly is a koan? Literally, the word koan means a public case or record of a public legal decision. In Zen Buddhism, a koan is a method used for spiritual practice. The teacher gives the student a koan, and the student is free to explore, contemplate, and find their own solution. A koan can be seen as a form of dialogue between teacher and student, but its primary purpose is not dialogue, since the meaning of a koan often defies logic, seems nonsensical, surprising, or absurd. Overall, it transcends all reasoning, conventional understanding, and ordinary logical processes. A koan might simply be silence, a single word, a harsh statement, or a very violent gesture from the teacher, even physical blows to awaken the student. Here are a few examples of koans. Does a dog have Buddha nature or not? A koan by Master Zhaozhou. The sound of one hand clapping, a koan by Master Hakuin. What was your original face before you were born? A koan by the sixth patriarch Huineng. What is Buddha? 3 pounds of flax, a koan by Master Dongshan. If you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha. If you meet the patriarch, kill the patriarch, a koan by Master Linji. Whenever anyone asked Master Guizong a question, he would simply raise one finger. One day, a layperson asked the novice what the master had taught him. The novice raised one finger. Master Guizong heard about this, called the novice, grabbed his hand, and cut off the finger. The novice ran away screaming, blood gushing. The master chased after him, then suddenly shouted. The novice turned around and the master raised one finger. The novice suddenly attained enlightenment. The unexpected, abrupt, and illogical nature of koans aims to stop the conventional interpretation of the mind. The bewildering and absurd nature of a koan pushes the mind into silence, breaking free from all attachment to standards. If a Zen student continues to cling to pure logical reasoning or formulate thinking, the koan will have no effect. In Zen Buddhism, words hold no significance and cannot be used to solve koans. Questions like, does a dog have Buddha nature? The sound of one hand clapping, the original face before birth, etc., have no appropriate answers. What is Buddha? 3 pounds of flax. The surprising and illogical nature of the question and answer cuts off all rational responses and pre-existing logical expectations in the mind. Such questioning and answering is a verbal trick to help the mind discard all reasoning and return to peace, the original essence of the mind. Master Linji's statement, if you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha. If you meet the patriarch, kill the patriarch, in the gateless gate, is a type of koan that shocks the Zen student into letting go of all attachments, even to the Buddha or the Dharma. Master Guizong's raised finger as an answer implies abandoning all notions and logical arguments, transcending the meaningless nature of words, bringing the questioner back to silence. However, the finger is still an expression, a basis for attachment. The novice, having lost his finger, had nothing to cling to. When he turned back and saw his master holding a knife and shouting, raising a finger, he suddenly realized the futility and emptiness of all logical reasoning and conventional interpretations, just like his severed finger. This novice later became a famous Zen master. Let's return to the example of a person meditating in the previous section, related to the concept of stopping conventional, dualistic, and logical thinking, preventing the sixth sense, mind, from interpreting. If the concept of stopping all thought seems theoretical, the use of koans is certainly a practical method that helps the sixth sense not interpret, bringing the mind back to a pure, peaceful, and calm state. The meditator in the previous example, even if not disturbed by external turmoil, such as hearing someone speak ill of them or hearing two neighbors quarrel, creating emotional turmoil that makes them stand up, could still react in two different ways. The first attitude is to keep the mind calm and peaceful despite hearing someone speak ill of them with malicious intent and falsehood, or hearing two neighbors arguing. If they can maintain a clear, calm mind, the sixth sense perceives the sound or speech but does not interpret, and the silence in the mind remains absolute and infinite. This is the reaction of an arhat. The second attitude is for the meditator to develop boundless compassion and sympathy for the person speaking ill of them with malicious intent, pitying them for being entangled in negative karma, and for the neighbors arguing, feeling compassion for them as they are prey to emotional turmoil, shaking with anger and ready to fight. These emotions, although positive in nature as compassion, are still emotions and will continue to bind the meditator in the cycle of rebirth. This compassion is the reaction of a bodhisattva. Not speaking is the Buddha's speech. The Lankavatara Sutra is an important Mahayana Buddhist scripture, presenting Buddha nature and enlightenment beyond all dualistic concepts of language. This sutra clearly states, from enlightenment until nirvana, the Buddha has never spoken a word, nor will he ever speak a word, because not speaking is the Buddha's speech. What does this mean? It means that all the Dharma the Buddha taught relies on dualistic and conventional language. The ultimate nature of reality cannot be spoken or described in words. The world of samsara or nirvana are just names, a formulaic expression, containing no absolute value. Without the opposing world of nirvana, samsara or the cycle of rebirth means nothing, and vice versa. White and black, existence and non-existence, good and bad, subject and object. Opposing each other in pairs is the dualistic nature of all our conventional understanding. Using dualistic language to convey and interpret understanding means that understanding is no longer understanding, as it cannot adequately describe suchness or the true and ultimate nature of reality. Only practice, the silence of meditation, and pure spiritual intuition, free from ignorance, can realize the absolute truth or the true nature of all phenomena. That is, all objects and events governed by the law of causality and impermanence, constantly changing around us. The above discussion captures what is found in the Buddha's Dharma. However, the Buddha also directly taught through silence. Once, on Vulture Peak, before a large audience eagerly waiting to hear him speak, the Buddha simply held up a flower and remained silent. Everyone was puzzled, except for one disciple, Mahakasyapa, whose face suddenly lit up with a smile. Upon seeing the flower and the Buddha's silence, Mahakasyapa was awakened and attained enlightenment. The Buddha then said to Mahakasyapa, "I possess the true Dharma I, the marvelous mind of nirvana, the true form of the formless, the subtle Dharma gate, not dependent on words and letters, but a special transmission outside the scriptures. This I entrust to Mahakasyapa." This incident is known as Niyam Hua Vitio, the flower sermon, illustrating the transmission of Dharma beyond conventional language, directly from mind to mind, Ditum Trintum. It also shows that nirvana is a concept in Buddhism that is expressed and defined differently depending on the context. According to the Lankavatara Sutra, translated into Chinese during the Tang Dynasty, nirvana means seeing into the abode of reality, true to its true nature. In Zen Buddhism, seeing into the abode of reality is the state of prajnaparamita, transcendent wisdom. This wisdom was directly received by Avalokiteshvara from the silence of the Buddha in meditation and taught to Sariputra in the Heart Sutra. In previous sections, we see that the absolute truth of all phenomena, the ultimate nature of reality, can only be perceived through practice, silence, and spiritual intuition. However, the above story adds another dimension. This ultimate nature of reality can only be transmitted through silence, from enlightened mind to awakened mind, such as the direct reception between the enlightened mind of the Buddha and the awakened mind of Mahakasyapa. After the Buddha's passing, Mahakasyapa was considered the leader of the Sangha and the first patriarch of Indian Zen Buddhism. The transmission of the robe and bowl continued until the 28th patriarch Bodhidharma, 470 to 573. In 520, Bodhidharma traveled by sea to Guangzhou to spread the teachings in China, meeting with Emperor Wu of Liang in Nanjing but failing to convince him. Bodhidharma then crossed the Yangtze River to Luoyang and took residence in the Shaolin Monastery on Mount Song. He spent 9 years in silent meditation, facing a wall, until Huike approached him, seeking to become his disciple. Bodhidharma became the first patriarch of Chinese Zen Buddhism, and Huike was later transmitted the teachings and became the second patriarch. The silence of Huike. During his time spreading the Dharma in China, Bodhidharma once called his disciples to test their understanding before returning to India. Each disciple stood up and presented their understanding of the Dharma, and each time Bodhidharma commented that they had grasped a part of his teaching, such as the skin, the flesh, or the bones. When it was Huike's turn, he simply bowed and remained silent. Bodhidharma then said, "You have attained the marrow of my teaching." Indeed, the Dharma or enlightenment cannot be explained in words. Words in the Dharma are merely a way to adapt to each individual's inclinations, nature, abilities, and understanding, indirectly expressing something deeper, an aspect of reality, to help individuals avoid confusion, density, and ignorance. The state of transcending all preconceived notions and established patterns is the state of not being confined to any predetermined form, free from the constraints and manipulations of pure reasoning and logical argumentation. Logical reasoning and argumentation, if directed inward, lead to confusion and dead ends. If directed outward, lead to endless and futile debates. If one understands the silence of the Buddha, all worries and questions driven by the desire to understand will disappear. It is the ego that makes us crave, even for understanding. Although noble, the craving for understanding still leads to attachment and fear. Fear of our ignorance, the same fear that made Malunkyaputta stop meditating to ask the Buddha whether the universe is eternal or not. Understanding the silence of the Buddha, we will feel truly at peace, as if sitting beside the Buddha in his silence. The non-expression of the mind is not a dead end. Silence is not a barrier, but a door opening to another world, a world of non-duality, without opposition, without subject and object. In that world, there are no arguments, no debates, no inner self, and no external environment. In that world, one can converse with flowers, hear the sound of insects in the grass, the shifting of a grain of sand in the desert, and even the conversations between the stars. One will understand the deep interconnection in the most profound form. A flower, a star in the sky, or a grain of sand in the desert is no different from oneself. They are within us, and we are within them, all merging and harmonizing together. Here is a poem from Dogen, 1200 to 1253, a great Japanese Zen master, translated as follows. In the gentle spring breeze, petals fall. The words I chant, who could guess, are the songs of the flowers. The silence of a Tibetan monk. In the latest book by French scholar Alain Grossray, spanning over 900 pages, entitled The Great Book of Buddhism, Le Grand Livre de Bouddhisme, Albin Michel Publishing, released in late 2007, a debate between a Korean Zen master and a Tibetan master is recounted. This meeting took place in the 1970s in the United States between Korean Zen master Song San and Tibetan monk Kalu Rinpoche. Buddhist experts and American Buddhists attended, paying close attention and anticipating the outcome of the debate between these two profound Buddhist teachers. Each master was accompanied by a large number of disciples dressed according to their respective traditions. The session began with great solemnity and formality. The Korean Zen master started, possibly intending to use Zen questioning techniques to test the Tibetan monk. He took an orange from his sleeve and asked Kalu Rinpoche, "What is this?" The audience looked at the orange and then stared at the Tibetan monk, waiting for an answer. But Kalu Rinpoche sat in meditation posture, silent and unmoving, showing no sign of response. The Korean master stood up, brought the orange close to the Tibetan monk's face, and shouted, "What is this?" Kalu Rinpoche remained silent. After a while, he leaned over to his interpreter and whispered a few words. The interpreter then announced to the audience, "Rinpoche says, what is the issue? There are no oranges in Tibet." The meeting ended abruptly and unexpectedly. Alain Grossray recounts this story to conclude a section on Zen koans. Indeed, the story is worthy of being considered a profound koan. However, we can explore several aspects of this story. The debate, though brief, was deeply meaningful and rich. Zen and Tantric Buddhism are two completely different schools, developed in different geographic locations, but both converge at the ultimate level of Dharma. The story reflects the flower sermon incident, but is much noisier. When Zen master Song San presented the orange and asked, everyone understood it was an orange because it was a conventional understanding. Although they waited for an answer, they already knew it was an orange. They anticipated something more interesting, but Kalu Rinpoche did not respond. If he had said orange, the debate would continue. If he said lemon, an argument would ensue. Instead, Kalu Rinpoche stated there are no oranges in Tibet, implying the orange is merely a conventional understanding, not absolute, not worth answering. A Tibetan who lives in the Himalayas has no idea what an orange is, so where is the truth? The second intention was to answer indirectly, unrelated to the question, which is a method to stop logical reasoning and the mind's articulation. He used Zen techniques to answer a Zen master's question: the silence of the Tathagata and the noise of the secular world. The three bodies of the Buddha are the abode of silence, an immense quietude. The Buddha achieved upon enlightenment and passed on to us. But can we see that silence? The opening lines of the Diamond Sutra describe the Buddha as a simple monk, begging for food, eating, quenching his thirst, then sitting under a tree with a peaceful and calm mind. Indeed, the Buddha walked barefoot, had only 2 robes patched from scraps of cloth, and a bowl for alms. This simplicity and quietude, the Buddha paid a high price to achieve, the price of enlightenment. It is not difficult to see the stark contrast between the 2 phases of the Buddha's existence, before and after enlightenment. Before enlightenment, his life was noisy and luxurious in the palace, followed by a life of asceticism full of endurance, with a mind constantly agitated by the suffering of sentient beings and the thick veil of ignorance covering the world. The second phase is the period of peace and quiet after the Buddha's enlightenment, having seen the true nature of reality, the empty and silent nature of all phenomena. For 49 years after enlightenment, the Buddha taught us the path to liberation from worldly suffering, a path leading from turmoil to joy, from noise to silence. The Buddha also set an example with his life, transitioning from the noise of the palace to the simple and peaceful life of a mendicant monk. This silent way of life reflects the true nature. Silence is nirvana, and nirvana is silence. When he was old, on his journey of teaching the Dharma, the Buddha stopped in a quiet forest, folded his robe into 4 to use as a pillow, and lay down between 2 sala trees. He lay on his side with one leg resting on the other. Some of us call ourselves Buddhists, but we always go against the Buddha's path, moving from simplicity to complexity, from poverty to wealth, from hardship to luxury, from silence to noise, whether in reality or just in dreams and illusions. We crave noise. Noise at birth, in every life event, and even in death. Even after death, we still strive for pride with drums, flowers, incense, morning cries, eulogies, and prayers for the dead. We always go in the opposite direction of the Buddha, looking forward to the illusion of a nirvana behind us. In chapter 5 of the Diamond Sutra, the Buddha asks his disciple Subhuti whether the Tathagata can be recognized by his 32 major and 80 minor auspicious marks. Subhuti answers no. The Buddha continues, Subhuti, it is as you say, all appearances are deceptive. If you see all appearances as non-appearances, then you see the Tathagata. The true Tathagata is empty, void, and silent. We, without any auspicious marks, constantly strive to add every possible mark to our meaningless names given by our parents, titles, degrees, medals, responsibilities. These marks first nourish and reinforce our ego, then deceive and exploit other simple beings. Through Dharma, the Buddha opens a world of peace, calm, and happiness for us. Instead of entering, we step out. We do not see the door to that world, being attracted by the opposing, noisy, and turbulent world that dazzles us. In the famous collection of koans titled Gateless Gate, Wumen Quan, by Zen master Wumen Huikai, 1183–1260, it is written, "The great way is gateless, with thousands of paths. Once you pass through this gate, you walk freely in the universe. But our step is a backward step. From the clear nature of Buddha nature, we step into the ignorance and turmoil of the mind. From the peace and joy of life, we step into the world of schemes and calculations." When looking at the Buddha statue, we do not recognize the depth and silence on the Buddha's face. We only hear the noisy bells and chanting for peace, paying attention to whether our names are read correctly on the prayer list. In conclusion, words are the source of disputes, noise is the source of distraction and confusion, while silence brings peace and happiness. Words are limited and narrow, but silence is infinite, transcending the dimensions of time and space. Silence is the essence of the Dharma and Nirvana, manifesting from the absolute non-violence of body and mind. This state is serene, joyful, peaceful, simple, and non-dual, expressing absolute freedom. Let us return to the story of the flower sermon for a final conclusion. When the Buddha held up a flower, he remained the Buddha, the tranquil one. The flower was still just a flower, neither beautiful nor ugly, silent as a flower. Mākāśyapa was still a disciple of the Buddha, his smile appearing and fading away in silence. Between the Buddha's enlightenment, the silence of a flower, and the awakened mind of Ma Kashyapa, there was no object or subject, no Buddha, no disciple, no flower, no teacher, no teaching, no listener. All was one, only the crowd was restless, bewildered, and waiting.